Good evening. It's great to see everyone. I'm Rita McDougall, Senior Curator here at the Academy, and I want to thank you for navigating all the ice and cold to join us for this program, Tending the Canopy, co-presented with WHYY. For those of us who are fairly new arrivals to Philadelphia, the city's trees, its towering tulip poplars, old beeches, colorful maples, and venerable oaks are true marvels. Philadelphia, located here in Lenape-Hoking on the native homelands of the Lenape, is situated in a bioregion defined by the Delaware River watershed and the vestiges of the great eastern deciduous forest. There are many special places to experience the magic of our trees, such as the old-growth forests of Carpenter's Woods in the Wissahickon, or on the banks of the Schuylkill in Bartram's Garden to see that amazing ginkgo tree, which I really love. Special thanks to Shira and her project Getting to Green and being here tonight to show us the way to these amazing places. Not far from here in upstate New York, fossil remains of the root systems of some of the world's oldest trees known on Earth have been uncovered in recent years. We humans have co-evolved with trees. Trees mediating between the sun and the soil are revered for their life-giving powers in cultures worldwide. Today, as we consider how we can address the urgent dual crises of climate change and biodiversity loss in this region, we naturally turn to the trees, which provide shade and shelter to humans and other animals, cool and oxygenate the air, sequester carbon, and make our neighborhoods and lives more beautiful, healthy, and joyful. It's super wonderful to learn about the Miyawaki Forest being planted in Kensington. So thank you, Pete Angevine, for being here to share that with us tonight. A great example of an exemplary project in the way of addressing climate change and biodiversity loss in that area. Tonight, we are fortunate to be joined by vital stewards of Philadelphia's urban forest, representing important organizations in the effort to tend to our trees, including the city's Park and Recreation Department's Tree Philly program, Pennsylvania Horticulture Society's Tree Tenders program, and UC Green, a community organization that's based in Philadelphia that helps galvanize efforts over there. Tonight we will discuss the process behind the creation of the Philly Tree Plan and the current state of the Philadelphia tree canopy. In our discussion, we will consider how the urban forest, which is so deeply intertwined with our urban infrastructures, reflects our hopes for the future and the many barriers to surmount in growing, thriving, and maintaining it. We'll also learn how we can all participate in proliferating the urban forest in the neighborhoods that we call home. Guiding the conversation tonight is the wonderful Maiken Scott, the host and executive producer of The Pulse, a national weekly health and science show. And Maiken is very artful in integrating your questions into the conversation, so fill out any questions that you might have on the little cards that we will gather throughout the conversation as they arise. So I'd love to welcome Maiken Scott, who will introduce our first speaker.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marina. I'm going to do that from down here. So in a moment, we'll have our whole panel, but to get started, we figured we could get a little bit of some state of the union, so to speak, on trees in the city. And to give us that, we have Erica Smith-Fitchman. She is city forester at Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. So Erica, take it away, and then we will follow with the panel.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All right. Thank you all for coming to this talk. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. This is, a topic about which I think a lot. So I'm going to give some background and context for our conversation. Again, my name is Erica Smith-Fitchman. I am the city forester at Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, so that means I work for the city, and I manage our urban forestry team, some of whom are here. Woo! And I also am happy to see a lot of amazing urban forestry advocates in the audience as well. So thank you guys for all the work that you guys do all the time to really advance what we're going to talk about now. So for some context about Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, my team and I are responsible for stewarding the over 10,000 acres of parkland in our city. Over half of it is natural areas, so that's forests, wetlands, riparian areas. We also manage all of the street trees planted in the right-of-way. There are about 130,000 of those. We do that with approximately 46 staff people. That includes in-house tree crews, inspectors, contract managers, community forestry folks. That's our tree filly program. Communications, workforce, and customer service, constituent services. But we are here today because the growth and care of our urban forest is an environmental justice issue. You can see on the map that not everyone in the city has access to the same resources. The urban forest is not equitably distributed across the city. The darker green areas are where there are more trees, and the lighter areas are where there are fewer trees. And there are some important patterns to keep in mind about our tree canopy. I'm going to let this flicker through a couple times so you can really see that there are fewer trees where there is more poverty in the city. This is true in many big cities across the country. There are also fewer trees where there are more Black and brown residents in the city. I'll let it flicker through so you can really see those patterns. So how are we doing now? What is the current state of our tree canopy in the city? This map shows the tree canopy as of 2018. We have 20% tree canopy across the city. Again, it's not equitably distributed, fairly distributed across the city. And between the years of 2008 and 2018, we lost 6% of our tree canopy. These are all reasons why we decided as a city and as a massive network of tree advocates and people who work in urban forestry across the city that we needed a strategic approach to the equitable growth and care of our urban tree canopy. So many people came together between 2020 and 2023 to create the Philly Tree Plan. The first thing that we did was to look at all the patterns, like we were just seeing some of those patterns, but all of the patterns of health demographics, environmental patterns, to see what areas of the city would benefit the most from increased investment in trees. And this map all the way on the right shows you those priority areas where there's low tree canopy, high asthma, high heat, and other things. And we involved 9,000 people in creating the plan itself. We made sure that people in those priority areas were well represented in the process of creating the plan. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but we had these incredible folks who are pictured here, one of whom you might recognize. I don't know if it'll let me. Will it let me? Oh, goodness, look at who this is. You're going to see her later. Dominique's up there. So we had incredible ambassadors from neighborhoods across the city who were gathering information from their neighbors to inform the plan. We did a survey that garnered over 7,000 responses, and we attended over 32 separate community meetings across the city. So ultimately, our plan has 8 goals. It really focuses on building the systems, the staffing, and the funding needed to grow and protect our urban forest, while also communicating with transparency about the challenges that people are encountering and never forgetting to celebrate. So a few quick highlights of implementation so far. We have been able to work with City Council, City Planning Commission, Law Department to strengthen the tree planting requirements in the zoning code, and to add a new requirement that developers need to provide compensation when they remove trees that they do not replant during their development. There are other things on here that are in much more detail about that legislation, like adding a requirement to plant a yard tree for every 1,600 square feet of open space in your development, etc. We are currently in the middle of a comprehensive natural lands assessment in partnership between the city and the Spatial Analysis Lab at University of Vermont. And the last one that was done in the 1990s. So you can see this image right in the middle is the mapping that we were able to do in the 1990s. These days, we can map every single tree and its canopy, its size, etc. Because if we have 5,000 square miles of, 5,000 acres, there we go. 5,000 acres of natural areas in the city. In order to protect them, we need to know what the quality of them and the condition of them is, because they provide invaluable services to the city of Philadelphia. We've also been able to increase coordination at the city level. We have developed, in partnership with the Department of Commerce, the Commercial Corridor Planting and Care Program. So we are able to work between our two organizations and many wonderful business community CDCs and business improvement bids on the ground to plant new trees, to train ambassadors, to care for those trees for 2 years after they're planted, and to invest in the people who are caring for those trees. And the Commerce Department recently hired a full-time staff person to manage this process, and she's in the back, Marissa Donahue. So we're very excited that the city is investing in this incredible program to plant and maintain trees and to pay people who live in the neighborhoods where those trees are being planted to care for them as well. And lastly, the Philly Tree Coalition. This is the culmination of a lot of work to increase coordination across all partners who are involved in the urban forest. The Philly Tree Coalition will be a group of folks who are invested in the coordination, communication, and fundraising for the implementation of the Philly Tree Plan. Because there's no one organization that is responsible for increasing tree canopy and protecting tree canopy across the city. Trees live on private property, on commercial property, in people's yards, in our park system, and so we all need to work together. So the coalition is a really important step in improving that coordination, making sure that residents in those priority areas still have a meaningful voice in the creation of policy and programs to advance the Philly Tree Plan. And I'm going to stop there.
All right, thank you. Just stay right up there. And then I'm going to welcome the rest of our panel up on stage, please. Will you come? That would be you. So, thank you so much. That was really helpful in terms of just setting the scene and getting us started. And now we're going to welcome the rest of our panel. We have Dominique London, who served as the executive director of UC Green and has a lot of experience in terms of what it takes to connect people to trees and to bring more trees to different neighborhoods. And then we have with us Dan Pasosi. He's the Director of Trees, which is a lovely title, Director of Trees at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. And please do put in your questions, whatever questions you have about trees, write big, write legibly, so I can fold those questions into the conversation. So one quick follow-up, Erica, I had for you. You said the tree canopy went down. What happened?
Oh, that's a big question.
Oh, yeah, you have to turn the microphone on. Yep.
Yes, that's a very big question. Technically, the study that we did to assess the tree canopy does not have the exact reasons, but we have talked a lot about it, and there are patterns. One thing I will say is that little trees take a while to grow and to show up on maps. So the tree tenders program that Dan oversees has been going since 1993, and there are thousands and thousands of trees that they and the city and other partners have planted that are just not showing up on the map yet.
Okay.
So don't lose hope. As trees grow, they will show up on the map, and we'll see that canopy. But there's been loss from development. There's been loss from insects and diseases like emerald ash borer, and the spotted lanternfly not as much, but hemlock woolly adelgid, and now we have beech leaf disease that's coming through, so there's a lot of things like that as well. We've also had tons of storms, more and more storms, and so trees come down, especially when those storms come in the summer, when the trees are in full leaf, and they're like a sail for winds, so they will come down. So those are a couple of the patterns.
And Dan, Erica just mentioned the tree tenders. What do the tree tenders do? What is their job?
So, is there anybody in the group who is a tree tender? How many tree tenders are out here?
Yeah.
See, plenty of them. So these are our heart and soul of our program. These are the boots on the ground. These are the folks who actually get the trees in the ground. PHS really just is that resource that can help provide the trees, procure the trees for them, help get all the resources that is actually needed to get a tree planted to these great volunteer folks who really are the ones who do the work out in the field and actually get trees planted.
Yeah. And Dominique, on the face, it seems like, who wouldn't want a tree, right? Who would not want a tree in front of their house? That's lovely. It's wonderful. But you actually have to do some ambassador work for trees. So talk a bit about what that work entails and what are some of the pushback reasons people give you?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So in my work, I developed something called design charrettes. And in the design charrette, essentially, you are not just educating residents and community members about the benefits of trees and telling them how cool they are, but you're also getting intel about what are the barriers. Sometimes it's not that people don't want trees, it's that they may not want the burden of having a tree, having the maintenance, having to clean up the leaves, or maybe there's a built environment issue such as a cracked sidewalk that they're responsible for taking care of. They are responsible for grinding up the stump in front of their home, and so that's cost prohibitive. So what the design charrette does is it's a give and take, and it allows for me to see what the barriers are and then come up with solutions to mitigate those barriers so that we both get what we want. I get to plant the tree and you get the benefit of having it.
If I want a tree planted in the city, what do I have to do? Where do I go? How do I start? Erica, do I start with you? All right, let's go.
I think we could all answer the question, but there are numerous ways depending on where you want to plant the tree. The trees that are planted in the sidewalk have the most restrictions because there are public safety considerations you have to make. So my team does inspect and approve all of those trees that are planted to make sure that they're the right species, that they're planted in the right spaces. So you can request a free tree to be planted through the city, or you can request through your local tree tenders group. I'll let Dan go into any additional detail. But if you want a if you want to get a tree to plant in your own yard, we also do yard tree giveaways every spring and fall. And so the Tree Philly team will work all across the city to give away free trees.
And then Dan, what does it take to keep a tree healthy? So let's say I got the tree planted outside of my house, the city dug up the sidewalk, it's there. What do I need to do to make sure that it actually stays there?
So first I'll start by saying the city's not digging up your sidewalk. Usually it's PHS or a Cabrera contractor, but that is one of the ways to get trees. That's part of our tree tender program. That's part of the application process. We have a table set up in the back, so if anybody's interested in getting a tree, there's a QR code with an application link on there, and you just fill out that application link, and we essentially take it from there. But to answer your question, once a tree actually gets put in the ground, it's about 3 years before it comes to a point where it can kind of survive well on its own. So for those first 3 years, it's really important to make sure that it's getting mulched, that it's getting watered, that it's being monitored for any damage, and protected. Street environments are really tough environments for trees to grow in. So all of that monitoring needs to take place over the course of those 3 years so they can get a really good chance of becoming established and last for years to come.
And Dominique, I couldn't help but notice a beautiful dog in the picture with you up there. So what's the dog's name?
His name is Trip.
Awesome. So one thing I hear people argue about all the time is dogs and trees and how much it hurts the trees when the dogs do their business around the trees, which is what dogs will do. So was that a topic that came up in, oh my God, we're getting so many questions already. So does that come up and how do people engage around that topic?
For me, that hasn't been something that people have spoken about, but I do have an interesting story about a church that I just did a planting at in the fall. I had Trip with me, and I was marking off with some spray paint where the trees were going. We were doing a large planting for this church, and a neighbor came out and proceeded to read me the riot, right? You're letting your dog pee in the yard. I couldn't get a word in, so I let her finish. And I was laughing, and I didn't mean to laugh at her. She was like, "What is so funny?" I said, "I'm here with my dog to mark off where I'm going to plant the trees." And she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I really apologize." But I think for her, it was a lot that belonged to the church, and her husband volunteered to clean it up. And I think the sight of the dog did bother her. But dogs peeing on trees isn't something that I've heard as a complaint. It is a complaint that I have, and I have a dog, but it is not something that I've come across.
And probably the trees can take it, right?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of stresses on trees in the right-of-way specifically, and like anything that's accessible to someone walking their dog or anything close to the road. So there's, there'd be like oil from cars, gas from cars, trash, and salt right now, right? So really the advice for how to help your trees deal with that, all of that kind of thing, is to dilute, to flush, water a lot at the end of the salting season, so that if there is salt in the tree pit, you're diluting it and getting it out of there. You don't want to overwater your trees in general, but that is something that you would do to protect them from anything like that.
What are some other stressors that affect our trees? You mentioned some of the pests that have come through. Are there any diseases on the horizon that we need to look out for? Dan, do you want to take that?
I mean, I think compacted soil is really a big issue. People like to drive up on the curbs and park right on top of the roots of the trees. That can be a really big issue in long-term tree health.
We got a question here. How do you map trees? Is it easy, was the question. And I figured we could get that one out of the way quickly because you showed us the beautiful maps. What's that? Oh my gosh. All right, thank you.
Sure. There are lots of different ways to map trees. The maps that you saw are maps that were generated from data taken from a plane. It's called LiDAR data, and it's essentially like three-dimensional data, so you can see where the trees are, how tall they are, how wide they are, all the dimensions of them, but you can't necessarily identify individual trees that way as easily. And so we use that to look at trends, to look at canopy coverage, et cetera. We also have mapped all of our street trees and a lot of our park trees by physically going out with a GPS-enabled tablet and dropping a point on a map, measuring the tree, how wide it is. That's a good measurement in arboriculture of how big and old it is. And then identifying the species. And we actually have Kirk here who did some of that work. So he knows intimately what it's like to map trees in the city.
Which trees do well around here? I feel like I see a lot of ginkgo trees, right? I see magnolias, but what does well around here? Dominique or Deb, do you want to start?
I want to preface this by saying I'm not a certified arborist, but as someone who picks the trees up and I get to do the tree checking year after year, I will say that some of the trees that are kind of sturdy, surprisingly, are the magnolias. Other trees that I've seen that sort of stick around are the eastern redbud. So those are two trees that I'm used to seeing when I go back and check that they're still there and they're thriving. You said oaks were hanging around, doing pretty well.
We were talking earlier. And I'm pretty new to Philadelphia. I've only been here, it'll be 2 years in March. But I moved up here from Louisiana, and where I worked as the director of grounds for the New Orleans City Park. And live oak trees were our gem. Those were the most important trees to us. And I was pretty shocked to find that when I came to Philadelphia, that there were a few sprinkled out the area up here. Not that they're doing well, they're doing really well, but they're a southern tree that's making their way north. So, to answer sort of the broader question there, there's a lot of trees that maybe did well here previously and will not do as well as some of the trees that are going to do well in the future will.
What are some of the wildest trees we're going to see in the next 10 years? Like, are we talking palm trees or what are we talking about?
I mean, I think all of us were at the ribbon cutting when Philadelphia Orchard Project had their high tunnel, and they had a banana tree. They had a Russian pomegranate. I have a Russian pomegranate in my garden, and it's blooming. And then I think there was an olive tree that they had in their high tunnel. And I was like, wow, our climate is definitely changing.
Any trees that are struggling right now or any trees under threat in our portfolio?
Yeah, there are some really good resources from the Forest Service and other research institutions that very specifically show which trees are going to be doing better in a changing climate and which ones are not going to be doing so well. The sugar maple is not doing so well, and it's predicted to not do so well. The Nyssa sylvatica, which is black gum. Thank you. I always forget the common name. The black gum tree is one of the ones that's going to be doing well. I think generally people are looking at a few states south of us at what the planting palette is there. Those zones to see what we might try. And there are some great experiments that the natural lands staff at the Parks Department and at the Fairmount Park Conservancy have done to try to introduce some species to see how they do, like loblolly pine and some of those species to try to test things out safely in the city's park system.
I think we should get into some of these questions because we have so many of them. So this one fits into what we're talking about right now, and it gets into invasive plants and deer pressure. So deer population is growing. So what are some of the threats that our trees are facing from different invasive species and also then from deer that like to eat away at trees, especially young trees?
I mean, one of the things that I see that seems to be the biggest issue is invasive vines taking over the tree canopy, taking and smothering out the various trees. I think the English ivy is one that I've seen that seems to be a really big issue. I'm sure there's other ones. I don't know them all, but that seems to be a big one.
And then what do you do about that? I mean, that's a lot to maintain. So can you even fight that? Timothy?
A really cool interaction that I had with some of the folks at POP, sometimes you can't fight nature, you have to can't beat them, join them. So there's a technique, vine versus vine. So if there is an invasive vine, perhaps planting a new vine over top of it. An example is I have a morning glory vine in my garden, and it was recommended that I put in a passion flower, which is also very robust, but it'll smother out the morning glory and it'll give me something to eat. So that could be a technique that folks could use as opposed to trying to fight nature, just sort of using its own resources against it.
the question is, do you recommend specific trees based on their support of biodiversity? So are there trees that are especially good in providing habitat for birds and other creatures that also want to live in the city?
I think both Dan and I can talk at length about how we choose species. Would you like to go first on how you choose the species?
Sure. I mean, obviously, I was going to start by saying that Parks and Rec has a recommended street tree species list. Fortunately, we have a really great arborist on staff who does our street tree species selection. And, you know, that's a great question about how it supports different environmental factors and different biodiversity. But what's more important is that right tree, right place thing. So we really are more concerned with making sure that the tree we plant is going to fit in the environment that it's planted in. And the things that we look at there are the infrastructure, you know, what the size of the tree that's going to fit there. Are there overhead wires? Is there, you know, tight parking? Like how is it going to fit? So street trees are really kind of more chosen based on the environment that's around there, as opposed to trying to help that environment.
They're hard to open. I will also say that, like Dan is saying, it's right tree, right place. So when you are choosing a species, you have to think about where you're planting it. If you're planting something in the right of way, you're planting it in a sea of concrete, which is not a native environment. So you have to plant something that's going to survive and thrive. So there are different considerations for what you would choose for a street tree as opposed to a park tree, where you can choose things that have a totally different shape, much bigger or wider, that need more soil volume. And then for our yard tree giveaway, we are very intentional about trying to bring in species that might be flourishing a little further south, different fruit tree species, trying to increase diversity across the different parts of the urban forest, even if within some parts of the urban forest, like street trees, you can't get as much diversity as you'd like.
Let's talk for a second about fruit trees, because fruit is awesome, right, if it works out right, but then in other situations, it may not be great, like if we're thinking about ginkgo berries or even a plum tree somewhere that's maybe throwing around a whole bunch of plums everywhere. So how does that come up, and how do you think about where to plant those trees?
So when I'm doing the design charrettes, the way that I engage neighbors after we've talked about the barriers and we start getting into their desired outcome, what do you want your environment to look like? Do you want these trees, again, as a block, right? I'm not just talking to an individual, I'm talking to maybe 12 neighbors at the same time. So they're like, well, it would be nice if we had flowering trees. Oh, it would be nice if every other one was flowering. Oh, well, I want a green tree. And so I'm getting their perspectives. And most times, unless it's a yard tree, they will tell me, I do not want a fruit tree, because they don't want to deal with the fruit that's on the ground. If there is a person who wants a yard tree, I do encourage that they get a fruit tree. We were talking earlier about man-spreading. All of the trees that we plant in Philadelphia are male trees. There's a lot of man-spreading going on with the pollen, and so adding some fruit trees to sort of balance that out. But if there is a yard tree, I'm always trying to encourage people to get a plum, or now the Russian pomegranate is on the rise, or something that is edible, pawpaw trees, things like that.
So if you plant more male trees, you do have more pollen? Is that a problem, or how do we think about that?
Yeah, not all trees have male and female.
Yes, of course. But
So some trees are going to get pollen regardless, right?
Yes.
So yeah, it's really challenging, because when you do have tree species that have a male or a female, if you plant the male trees, you're not going to have as much debris that falls, but you will have the pollen. If you plant the female tree, then you're going to have like the ginkgo berries, you're going to have the like honey locust pods, etc. There's a lot of different considerations to make. There's no silver bullet for any of those conversations.
all right. I was trying to organize these questions in an order that makes sense, but I don't think I can do it at this point. So let's just plow through some of these. So how can residents of small streets protect their trees from traffic, from trucks and trash trucks and so on? That's a big issue. I had a tree in front of my house that got hit, and it did not survive. So what do? We have small streets, we have big cars.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Please let me know if you have any great solutions. But, short of putting a bollard up, which not everybody wants, is not really functional. I mean, it's kind of just a risk of the situation. But taking care of it, keeping it staked, making it really visible is definitely one way to do it. But it's a problem.
I would say that one of the most reasonable solutions that's not permanent, so you have to pay to remove it, and is not going to cause permanent infrastructure, is just a small fence around the pit. It's not going to prevent a car door, but it is going to prevent people from stepping in the pit, reducing the compaction. It's going to potentially, depending on the size of the dog, prevent the dogs from getting in there. And it also allows for the free flow of air and water. So like a 18-inch to 2-foot high fence around the pit can work.
Yeah. What do you know about the survival rate of newly planted trees? Do you have a number that you say if we plant 100 trees, 50 are going to make it, 80? What do we know there?
I don't want to quote this, but our survival rate is pretty high. The street trees that we plant have a pretty good success rate. And really most of the ones that we lose are to situations like you talked about. Mm-hmm. It's not so much because they didn't last healthy-wise. They get damaged, and that's what takes them out for the most part.
How old are these trees when you put them in? They're little guys, but they've probably been around for a while.
So the street trees we do at PHS are they're bare root trees. They're 1.5 inches in caliper to 2 inches, and it really depends on the variety. But 3 to 5 years, I would say.
No. Anything?
Yeah, I wanted to add the why. The reason why the survival rate of these trees is so high is because these are trees that are planted by tree tenders. The advantage of having a tree planted by a tree tender is that once the tree is in the ground, the relationship doesn't stop there, right? So the year after your tree is planted by your local tree tender, you will have your tree tenders come back doing an activity called tree checkers, which is a data collection, a community-run data collection sort of workshop where any volunteer can join. You will go back and check every single tree that's been planted the previous year. You're measuring the tree trunk to see how much it's grown. You're checking the tree vigor. You're checking the pit. You're doing a little bit of pit care. And then you get to leave a cute little report card in the person's mailbox to tell them how well they watered their tree, if there are any recommendations that you have. And so that's just year one. So year 2 or year 3, you have what we call pruning club. So now the same volunteers that have planted your tree, we're going back out, we're looking at those blocks and saying, hey, these trees are due, they're established now, let's go and do a little bit of structural pruning. So you're in year 3 now, whereas if you get a tree planted by, your local business, you're not gonna get that sense of community, you're not gonna get your tree that person coming back unless you pay them. And so the survival rate of these trees are high because you have people that are coming back and they know these trees. These trees are part of our community. They're our neighbors. And so we go back and we check on them year after year. And so I think that is a large reason why the survival rate is so high.
Thanks, Maiken. It's absolutely true. Yeah.
So it takes staying on top. What is the oldest tree in the city? Not sure if you can answer that, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about where we find some of the oldest trees in the city.
Well, in order to really know that, the tree would have had to been cut down. So you could count the rings. Well, there are some amazing historic trees in our historic gardens. So at Bartram's Garden, there's the ginkgo and the yellowwood trees that are historic, hundreds of years. Let me not say that. I don't know how old. We have a state champion chestnut oak in Howell Park in Germantown that is massive. If you want to find the biggest trees in the city, you can just go to pabigtree.org. There is a literal inventory of all the biggest trees of each species that have been found in the state. And you can search by like exactly where you live and stuff and see which trees are nearby you and find them if they're on accessible land.
What is your best pitch to somebody who is on the fence about planting a tree? Dominique, that question is made for you.
I walk around with a heat gun and I take a reading of the sidewalk without shade, and then I take a heat reading just about 5 feet away in the shade. Is life better without or with the tree? And I'm like, oh, wait the application in.
Any follow-up to that? We had.
Well, I would say that a lot of the reasons why people don't want trees in the city is not necessarily that they don't understand the value of the tree. It's because they're afraid of the impact that the tree would have on their property. So there's a lot of fear about the utilities and the sidewalks, and they're all valid fears. I would say the best thing that we're doing that is recommended in the Philly Tree Plan is to try to address those challenges and provide support programs so that people can feel confident in having a tree on their property and that they won't be completely liable for what happens. So just an example, the city just hired a sidewalk coordinator, and one of their jobs is going to be to look at sidewalks and trees and see what the scale of the problem is, and to identify ways to create support programs so people can get some support when their tree, if there's any problem between their tree and the sidewalk.
Does the owner of a property have to give permission to plant a tree? And is a 3-foot square plant bed enough to plant a street tree? So how much space should you have? So let's get to the permission first. So who has to say yes to the tree?
That's a Parks and Rec question.
All right, let's do it.
So currently, yes, people have to sign on to sign permission to get a tree. In certain circumstances, when we are able to provide follow-up care, like in the commercial corridor tree planting and care program I just described earlier, we are doing an opt-out program where people, because it's a commercial area, it's very hard to find the owner of the property, it's not always the business, et cetera, and we have amazing on-the-ground ambassadors through our community groups. We're paying people to care for the tree. That is a situation where we would do an opt-out, where we would say, here are all the places where trees can go. We're going to plant one there unless you tell us otherwise. And we always honor the opt-out if someone says we don't want a tree. But in residential areas and for most places, it is still by permission.
We did have a question, I can't find it at the moment, but somebody asked about if you're a renter, can you get a tree? Or what are your avenues to try to get more trees onto your street?
I would love to address that. So
All right.
I get excited when I that question because that was part of, during the design charrettes, that was part of the feedback. And so during my time with UC Green, I ended up working with a cohort of master's degree students at Penn to come up with some language and some handouts and some resources that we could give to renters as well as landlords, finding ways to speak on their behalf or to speak collectively and say, hey, you have 12 residents that live in your building that want to get trees. Can you sign onto this application? And it's been a small start, but I will say that it has been very impactful in getting apartment buildings and some mom and pop landlords to sign off and say, yes, we would like you to plant trees. As a matter of fact, I have 4 properties scattered. Can you plant here as well?
We had a question about native trees and other trees that are perhaps not native. What's your take on that? Because that changes all the time, what is considered native and what isn't. So do you draw that line somewhere, or how do you think about that? Dan, do you want to start?
I think, when PHS does a lot of street trees. That's kind of our bread and butter. That's what we focus most of our attention on. And I think when the native conversation comes up, it's and it does come up a lot. We like to really, again, stress that right tree, right place thing. And it does not always translate to native trees. And I think that just because it's not a native tree doesn't mean that it's not the right tree for that space.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what I was saying before, where you have to look at where you're planting, what are the stresses of that situation. There is an exciting new program that we are doing with the Fairmont Park Conservancy, where we're looking at a couple of neighborhood parks across the city, identifying the current tree canopy, what the species are, what the condition of the canopy is, and then developing succession plans. And that's going to take into account these native versus non-native, what is currently overrepresented there, what is maybe tied to the history of the park and the culture, and make those decisions about how to plant trees for the future success of the canopy at those parks. A lot of the parks were planted originally all at the same time, so they have trees that are all the same age, the same species, and that is not a good way of having a healthy canopy. You need a diversity of age and species.
Question, there are these trees that I see pop up seemingly overnight. They have huge leaves and they can grow in like any crack. Do you know which ones I mean?
Paulownia.
What's up with those? Like, are they bad?
Oh.
Are they, I mean,
This is a fun one.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about Paulownia, which is the princess tree. If you've ever seen the seed pods, they're very big, they're very lightweight. They came here because they were used as packing material.
The seed pods.
Yes, the seed pods were used as like packing peanuts on ships. And so that's how they got here. But they have been used in historic landscapes. So there are Paulownias planted all around Logan Circle on the Parkway. We are slowly replacing them with a similar but native tree, the catalpa. But yeah, they escape and they can grow anywhere.
Yeah, they can grow like out of a roof. I mean,
Yeah, and they grow very fast. So in the tree plan, we do have a recommendation to help educate people about these weed trees and address them while they're small. It's hard, but it's important.
we touched on this a little bit, but how will all of this ice against the trunks of the street trees impact the trees? Anything to look out for? You talked earlier about flushing out the salt when it finally thaws out. Anything else we should be looking out for?
Dan's like, I was in New Orleans until recently.
I mean, so similar to ice is also during construction projects, like one of the things construction companies will do, and it's similar to when you're moving, is they'll pile dirt up against the trunk, and then they'll use that trunk of the tree as the backstop to load snow or dirt into their loader buckets. So, I mean, that to me is one of the concerns I see, especially with the city getting out and all the different people getting ready to clear all this snow. That's certainly a big concern.
Yeah, that's a good point, like scraping against the trees. I think that the ice physically on the bark of the tree is not a problem. The problem comes when you have ice that accumulates on the branches and it gets very heavy and the branches split. Thankfully, we didn't see that, but if anyone saw anything that was happening in the American, like, southeast, Tennessee, South Carolina, they had awful ice storms where they have trees just completely splitting apart because of the weight. So thankfully, we didn't have that happening, but I think that's more of the risk.
If a tree dies in front of your house, whose responsibility is it to take away the body, so to speak? Because that gets expensive.
I was going to say, we get this call a lot, and we always try to recommend to the homeowner, if you have the means and you have the capability, to go ahead and remove that yourself. It's going to be a much easier process. We love to follow that up with, as soon as you get it removed, we will get a new tree planted there for you as soon as possible.
Okay.
So the Parks and Rec Department is responsible for the trees in the right-of-way. we have a way of identifying which ones need to be removed, how much of a hazard they are. We have certain amounts of money that we have to triage that information and remove the most hazardous or critically hazardous trees, and then move down the list for the ones that might be not looking so great, but they're going to stay for a couple more years. So it's kind of a moving, a lot of moving pieces to that, but ultimately Parks and Rec is responsible for handling that, yes.
This is an unfair question, but what are your favorite trees? Let's start with you, Dominique. Let's pick one or two because the list could get long.
Right now, my favorite tree is just a peach tree because I planted a peach tree some years ago, and last season was the first year that I got almost like 200 pounds of peaches. So
How many?
about 200 pounds of peaches, insane.
Wow, that's incredible. Where's your house? What about you? Plus, they're so beautiful. I feel like in the spring they're so pretty. Dan, favorite tree?
Did you do a lot of pruning on that peach tree to get that kind of result? Really? Wow. That's great. I'm gonna go with the live oak, right? That's just my favorite tree from where I came from. But I also like maples and other hardwood trees like that.
So
yeah.
I do love the black gum, even though I can never remember the name of it. When it turns color in the fall, like individual leaves will turn bright searing red while the rest of it is still green. It's totally wild. I think it's gorgeous. And also the white oak, which is majestic.
All right, let's get in one more question. I think this is a great one to end on. Recommendations on how to get more involved with tree planting, even if you have no experience and not a huge amount of knowledge yet. So how do you get involved?
Become a tree tender.
How do you do that?
So it is by geography, but Dan can speak to how to become a tree tender under PHS. And I also would say go to a tree planting. They happen twice a year. It's another benefit of getting your tree from a tree tender is that there is a consistent cadence of tree planting. So you get trees planted in the spring during Earth Day weekend, and you get another one in the fall in November. So April and November, find out who your local tree tender group is and just show up, volunteer, and do some tree planting. That's a great way to do it.
Anything to add to that?
I'll just follow up. Nina is here. Everybody's wave to Nina. We have a table set up in the back. We have all the information you could want to how to get involved with the tree tender program. And I also just want to, echo what Dominique said. You don't have to be a tree tender to go get involved with your local tree tender group and get out there and plan. Just reach out to us. We can show you, tell you where any planting events are happening, and get you involved. So. It's really that easy.
Great. So just show up and you will learn as you go.
And become a UC Green Block Forester. Go on our website for more.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all so much. Thank you for the wonderful questions, everybody. And thank you all so much for the work you do for the city. We all appreciate it. And I think our city is so much more beautiful and so much more livable because of the things that you do and you bring. And all of you in the audience who are tree tenders. So thank you for that. And I think,
Yeah, I'll just say again, it's just great having everybody here today. We do town squares a couple times a year, so we'll keep an eye out for the next one. You can go to ansp.org. We also have a couple of amazing things coming up, the Botany of Nations and the Confluence Film Festival, so just keep a lookout on our social media and on our website. We'd love to see you back again. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.